Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. Can you believe that we're already halfway through the year? And next week is the 4th of July. My Dharma talk today is titled Buddhism in the Land of Liberty, a reflection on what it means to be an American Buddhist. Do you recognize these amazing places? I've been to both of them, and it's nothing short of jaw-dropping. What's the first one you see? Yep, Notre Dame in Paris. And the second one? You all know, yes, good Buddhist. Do you recognize this amazing place? Yes, I realize this question is for the wrong audience. I'm sure any other audience might be flummoxed. I understand. Of all the organized religions in the United States, Christianity is still the largest. Well, I visited the Nishi-Honganji Temple during a visit to Kyoto this past spring with my daughter Leah. It was my first visit to the temple, and it was the first time that I had been back to Kyoto actually for 20 years. I remember being dropped off by the taxi at the front gate in the early morning, maybe 5:30-ish a.m., getting ready for the 6 o'clock service, and it was still dark with just the beginning of sunrise in the air. As we walked through the main gate, I felt a lump in my throat as we faced the Hall of Amida Buddha and the Founders Hall in the morning stillness and the emptiness of the grounds. I was surprised by my reaction, but maybe not so much in retrospect. I felt pride in belonging to the Jodo Shinshu tradition, and finally a physical connection to the head temple and all that it represented to me. It stood as beautiful and sacred in its simple elegance and infected me as much as I believe a Catholic feels when entering St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. What a wonderful feeling and a wonderful experience. It's then that I think about the journey it took to get to a place where we can experience the Jodo Shinshu teachings here in the United States and all the hardships that the Issei and Nisei went through in the past 100 plus years to allow me to have this experience. Over the past year, we've witnessed actions in this country that have brought back to mind the struggles experienced by the Japanese immigrants so many years ago. I never felt the connection so strongly as when the immigration issues that have simmered for months escalated to raids executed through racial profiling a few weeks ago. The fear and despair that many residents are currently feeling hits home this time. For some reason, it just seems personal. And it's ironic that here in Los Angeles, the Japanese American community is a victim along with, again, with a temporary lockdown, the vandalism, and the resulting loss of business in Little Tokyo. So I wanted to reflect today on how the Issei worked stoically to ensure that the following generations would thrive along with their culture and religion as Americans, and ultimately that their Buddhism would extend to all Americans. How did we get here? And how did the Buddhist teachings support them and can continue to provide support today? The first generation of Japanese Americans immigrated to the West Coast starting in the late 1800s, seeking a better life, primarily for economic independence. They were first welcomed for their labor as a result of the Chinese Exclusion Act. But eventually, they faced racial discrimination as the population of immigrants grew. Agriculture became the most popular vocation. This anti-Japanese sentiment brought restrictions on land ownership and ultimately a stop to immigration with the passing of the Immigration Act of 1924. Life was difficult for the Issei, and they sought refuge through their religion. In 1899, after requests from immigrants on the need for priests in the United States, the Honganji decided to send two ministers, Reverend Shoei Sonoda and Reverend Kakuryo Nishijima, to San Francisco and subsequently established the Buddhist Mission of North America, which oversaw the propagation of temples through the West Coast. Here's a photo taken in the early 1900s of the White River Buddhist Temple. I got this from their website. My grandparents are in this photograph somewhere. I wanted to share that here's a photo taken in 1919 of my grandparents who had a dairy farm near Auburn, Washington. I found it online in an article on the history of dairy farming in Washington. I was searching for photographs to use for my presentation. It's amazing what you can find online. I think we might have this photo in the tons of boxes my brothers and I have put aside in storage to go through later. I know that many families share this challenge of saving and sorting old photos and then wondering who's who in them. My only advice is don't wait to ask your family elders to help identify them. And this picture I know because it was labeled on the website that my grandfather is the gentleman standing the second to the left. My grandmother obviously is the one on the far left. And they're there with their the three smallest children are my uncles, the three oldest sons. And the tallest boy is a cousin. This is the saddest part of the Japanese immigrant history. On February 19, 1942, Executive Order 9066 was signed by Roosevelt, which authorized the incarceration of almost 120,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans based on race or ancestry, as opposed to activities of the incarcerated. Wartime fueled the fear and hate against a group who were already marginalized and discriminated against. Politics and the media stoked the flames. Can you imagine the fear, bewilderment, and despair the Japanese Americans felt? Families had to act fast to make decisions about so many things: staying together, what to do with their things. Buddhist ministers and community leaders were among the first to be rounded up due to their seemingly closer ties to Japan. The complex role religion played in the mass incarceration hasn't been a focus in the history of that period, but it is an inspiring story of how Japanese Americans maintained their right to be both American and Buddhist, and ultimately made possible the development of a new form of American Buddhism. Reverend Dr. Duncan Williams presents the story in his book, American Sutra. The book had an accompanying exhibit at Janum a few years ago. It was titled Sutra and Bible, which I found so powerful and poignant. People had very little time to prepare to leave their homes. Many families had destroyed or left many of their Buddhist artifacts, sutra texts, and obotsudans at home. Anything written in Japanese was suspect and prohibited at most camps due to concerns it may contain subversive information. Constitutionally, the practice of Buddhism, or any religion, could not be prohibited at camp, so makeshift temples and altars were constructed out of scrap wood or whatever material that they could find at camp. Buddhism ultimately thrived in the camps as the Dharma offered comfort in its teaching on suffering and loss amid such an unsettling environment. Ironically, these conditions gave rise to a more Americanized Buddhism. Reforms across different Buddhist sects loosened their ties to headquarters in Japan. And before the end of the war, the Buddhist Missions of North America changed its name to the Buddhist Churches of America. Leadership in America was elected now, no longer assigned by the Honganji. Nisei stepped up in the 1950s and 60s to help define the direction of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism in the post-war years. They faced the pressure of expectations of their Issei parents to succeed in the United States while retaining their culture and religion, at the same time still facing discrimination. Yet they were able to establish both a Japanese American identity and a Buddhist identity. Dr. Scott Mitchell's book, The Making of American Buddhism, pays tribute to the Japanese American Shin Buddhists for contributions in establishing Buddhism in America. He states in the book that while some Nisei converted to Christianity, kind of part of assimilation, many Nisei Buddhists held fast to their religion, and in fact that they could lay claim to an American identity inclusive of their religions, lay claim to an American identity inclusive of their religious identity. Nisei argued that Buddhism was both what made them good Americans and what they had to contribute to America, a rational and scientific religion of peace. The Nisei Buddhists contributed to building communities and networks that supported the growth and spread of Buddhism, and not only Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. Sanghas and church youth group organizations were very important in the support resources. Their active work in organizing translations, publishing articles, opening their homes and churches to scholars was critical in establishing a strong group of practitioners, a religious infrastructure, so to speak, which helped spread and popularize Buddhism. This included the Zen Buddhist D.T. Suzuki, white converts such as Alan Watts, and the beat poets such as Jack Kerouac. So Dr. Mitchell gives credit to the Japanese-American Jodo Shinshu Buddhists for making American Buddhism possible for all Buddhist traditions. Over the past 120 plus years, Jodo Shinshu Buddhism may have experienced a tumultuous and very interesting history in America, but what has never changed are the Dharma teachings of Shinran Shonin. So what can we learn from the experience of the Japanese immigrants? What are the Dharma lessons that can help us in tough times? I can touch on at least 3 lessons on compassion, self-awareness, gratitude, and I'd like to give much credit to Reverend Dr. Jeff Wilson and his book, Living Nembutsu. I think you've seen this before. Many of us have referenced him and his book before in his writings. It has been my go-to reference to help me understand and bridge Shinran's teachings with the complexities of today's social challenges. Let's start with compassion. The compassion of Mita Buddha is for all people, not just good people. As foolish beings, we accept that we will sometimes fall short and do bad things, no matter how good we think we are, leading to a sense of being evil. We also accept that Amida Buddha will embrace us just as we are, foolish and evil. Evil can also refer to those who are unwanted and marginalized. The evil people who may be suffering the most are in need of the most compassion. Shinran wrote in the Tanisho, even a good person attains birth in the Pure Land, so it goes without saying that an evil person will. This is the ultimate display of compassion, to offer compassion to both oppressor and oppressed. Self-awareness. Understand and accept that we are all foolish beings who fall short at times and suffer from the 3 poisons, delusion, greed, and anger. So much suffering is based on misunderstandings, not from what we see looking outwards, but what we see looking inwards. What we're missing looking inwards. If we spent more time looking inward, we would see our own shortcomings. Instead, it's easier to lock in on our own views in a conflict and not see or understand others. Our egos insist that we're right and others are wrong, but they, with their own egos, feel the same way. We are both bombus. If we really understand ourselves, then we will realize that we are actually the source of the conflict. If we're able to accept our own subjective biases, it allows us to open our minds to understand another person's view, even if we don't agree with it. This is an extremely valuable lesson, but a difficult one. I challenge you to turn on any television news commentary show and practice this teaching. I know nothing at all of good or evil, but with a foolish being full of blind passions in this fleeting world, this burning house, all matters without exception are empty and false. The Nembutsu alone is true and real. Shinran understood that as a foolish being, he didn't have the capacity to know good or evil acts. He was no better than those who opposed him. Only the Nembutsu is true and real. Gratitude. Gratitude is in response to receiving Amida Buddha's unconditional wisdom and compassion through the Nembutsu. In turn, it inspires good efforts without intention of merit. Interdependence helps us understand that we and all things are universally connected. It leads us to action. It allows us compassion. Barack Obama said that whatever we once were, we are no longer just a Christian nation. We are also a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, a Buddhist nation, a Hindu nation, and a nation of non-believers. This photo from a few years ago is another lump in the throat moment where Buddhist leaders representing the various sects in the United States were invited to celebrate Vesak Day at the White House with a wonderful shot of Bishop Harada making an offering at the altar. It's another example of finally being seen in a predominantly Anglo-Protestant culture. We should never lose sight of our right to be here in this country and recognize for who we are as Buddhists. Last week, a federal court ruled that a Louisiana state law requiring the Ten Commandments be posted in all public school classrooms was unconstitutional, as it violated the rule of separation of church and state. The expectation is that the case may make its way to the Supreme Court, so we shall see how that goes. I have nothing against the Ten Commandments as an ethical guide, but if that's the case, why not the Eightfold Path? The Japanese immigrants reinforced the idea that Buddhism, like any other religion, could be part of the American identity and be applicable to all Americans, not just Japanese Americans. Their resiliency made it possible today to have a B for Buddhism etched on U.S. Armed Forces dog tags, to have Buddhist chaplains in the armed services and other government sectors, and to have the Dharma wheel carved on gravestones at national cemeteries. Shinran's teachings have been alive for over 800 years. It has shown resilience and flexibility to adapt to practice in America in the last 100 plus years, and I expect it will continue to adapt to the needs of a continually changing world in the future. So here we are as American Buddhists as we approach both Independence Day, the 4th of July, and our Obon season. There's a lot to reflect on. We celebrate Independence Day by acknowledging the signing of the Declaration of Independence. How timely it is to consider the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." We celebrate the Obon season by offering gratitude to our Issei pioneers for their sacrifice and resilience in establishing the foundation for our faith and place in the United States, despite the struggles that contradict the core principles of the Declaration of Independence. They both will always be an inspiration for us to show compassion for those who are facing similar experiences even today. May the Dharma teachings continue to provide relevance and comfort in a world that may not always be kind. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.